call to order the November 23rd, 2015 council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. DeJohn?
Here.
Mr. Mano?
Here.
Mr. Mercurio?
Here.
Mr. Monaco?
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Here.
Mr. Sharia?
Here.
Mrs. Teresi?
Here. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a hard time with that, don't we? We will now move on to acceptance of the minutes of our November 19th, 2015 council meeting. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of the approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Monaco? You were,
I'm sorry, I abstain. I was
Thank
absent.
you.
Thank you.
the minutes of our November 19th, 2015 council meeting have been approved. We will now move on to the minutes of our Committee of the Whole meeting of November 18th. Everyone has had the opportunity to read the minutes. Is there a motion to approve as written?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Any changes, deletions, or amendments to the minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes of our Committee of the Whole meeting of November 18th have been approved as written. Next, we will move on to correspondence and announcements. Is there any member of council who has correspondence? Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. On November 18th, the second annual Mayfield Heights Citizens Police Academy graduated here in council chambers, and I would like to read a letter of correspondence to Lieutenant Rodney Leonard, Corporal Doug Woods, Sergeant Tony Mealy. I would like to take a moment to offer my compliments on your important contribution to the Mayfield Heights Citizens Police Academy, aka CPA. Hold me in appreciation of the time and effort you extend on the CPA attendance. It was my pleasure to witness firsthand the group effort, dedication, and expertise you applied to this CPA experience. Thank you for providing the chance to realize the value of this enlightening, educated, fun, interactive awareness of our men and women in blue, making it possible to watch the camaraderie and support of our many qualified safety units and gaining respect for their craft is to your credit. Taking care in sharing the personal pride in duties throughout an officer's professional career presented worthy lessons. As a willing participant, I will take with me a job well done. A special thank you to Chief Bittner for allowing his creative idea to extend to the hand of this department. Signed, Susan A. Sabetta. The graduating class of 2015, Dominic Amoroso, Jerry Banks, Gail Crane, Kurt Fellman, Kristen Skanda, Kim Maneri, Danielle Marticus, Joyce Marticus, Charlene McCarthy, Patrick Morin, Michael Puno, Rosemary Puno, Joseph Sepka, Chandru Omapathy, Aaron Van Ice, and Bill Warford. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any other comments from council? I would just like to congratulate our Mayfield Heights Fire Department for winning the chili cook-off again this year. This is the second year that they've won, and they do a terrific job. So congratulations to the fire department. thought they only took care of fires. See? Next, we'll move on to reports of officers, and we will begin with Mayor DeSico.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. Well, we couldn't dodge the snowflakes forever, but they lasted. We held out for a while, but the weather forecast does look good for the holiday travel, so should make everything safe and easy for everyone this holiday. I wanted to send my congratulations to the Mayfield Wildcats. They gave us another awesome season of football. Lake County Sewer Company has been contracted for sewer rehabilitation on certain streets in our city. The work has been authorized by the Cuyahoga County Department of Public Works. Flushing and televising work began today and will continue for the next several days. Testing and sealing of the sewer joints will follow. The project will last approximately 3 weeks. The affected streets are Marnell between Hawthorne and Lander, Mayflower east of Mallard, Hawthorne north of Mayberry, and Mallard north of Mayberry. As the holiday season kicks off, please remember to shop local. We have fantastic retail and dining right here in our community, and let's keep our business neighbors strong. Take a break from all that shopping and join us for family fun at the holiday lighting ceremony on Sunday, November 29th from 6 until 8 in the fire department bays. It is an event for the entire family. There will be music, activities, refreshments, a visit from Santa, and the illumination of the holiday lights on City Hall. Finally, I'd like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving, especially our troops stationed around the world. We are thankful for their service and for their families who also face sacrifices so that our freedom and blessings are ensured. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Okay, we will move on to our Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening, but I have 2 notes with regard to agenda items. The first is with regard to resolution number 2015-60, which is amending or correcting the amount for the police department addition. I still have some additional information to obtain, so I'd request that that be placed on first reading this evening. And also with regard to ordinance number 2015-45, which hopefully will get added to the agenda. That's the one that we didn't put on there. If it is added to the agenda, once again, I got some changes from Chief Bittner this morning, so that's not in a position to be adopted yet, so I would also request that be placed on first reading. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any questions for Mr. Murphy? We will move on to a report from our Director of Finance, Mr. Tribby.
I have no report this evening, but we do have several large items on the agenda,
We
so
do.
we will address those when they come up.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any, I'm sorry, Mr. Tribby, are there any questions for Mr. Tribby? We will next move on to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, and we will begin with the Building Committee, and that's Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report tonight.
Are there questions for Mr. Mano? We will move on to Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Mercurio.
Thank you, Madam President. As the Finance Director mentioned, we do have a couple items on tonight's agenda that we can address when they come up.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Mercurio? We will move on to our Legislative Committee, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Are there questions for Mr. Monaco? We will move on to Public Works and Services Committee, Mr. Sharia.
Thank you. Well, the Browns, of course, had drawn a bye week last Sunday, but the service department wasn't fortunate enough. They didn't get a bye. Beginning at about 9 o'clock, they were out on the streets taking care of, I think, 98 streets, dropping, perhaps 100 tons of salt. But the good news is, last November, they were out a lot earlier and dropped a lot more salt. So this isn't so bad. Now, as a reporter, by the way, my sources tell me that the weather is going to get better, Mr. Mayor. And that means the leaf collections will resume. And they've been out there doing their job, and the piles are getting smaller, and that means they'll be able to do more streets because the piles are smaller. So I want to congratulate the service department. However, they still haven't put Brutus up in front of the building. They put a wreath up on top of the building, and they used a hook and ladder that I saw. So they've done that job well done. Now that completes my report, and I want to thank you this time for your time. Until next time, which will be the last time for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharia. Are there any comments for Mr. Sharia? Mr. Mano?
Oh, God.
Can we tape that tagline so after you're gone, we can still play it, you know,
Oh, yeah.
for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Use the television reruns.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to Recreation and Parks Committee. Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. December 8th, Winterfest theme adult luncheon has 44 attending. Our December lunch brunch will be going to Burntwood Tavern on December 16th at 11:30. If you're interested, a reservation must be made. The Santa breakfast is Saturday, December 12th. The sessions are 9 a.m. to 10:15, 10:30 to 11:45. $5 per person. Reservations can be made by calling 440-442-2627 or visiting the city's website. A reminder, Wildcat Sport and Fitness is the place to go to get some exercise, whether that is walking or working out with weight or cardio machines. Please stop by and tour the facility or find out more about the best-kept secret in Mayfield, our low rates. The next Park and Rec meeting will be a joint November-December meeting on December 9th at 7 p.m. here in Council Chambers. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? We will then move on to Safety and Transportation Committee. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, Mr. Murphy had mentioned ordinance number 2015-45. It's the secondhand dealer ordinance. I don't know if this council would like to place that on the agenda tonight, but this ordinance does give the police a better opportunity to monitor and track items that are sold by secondhand dealers. And as you know, these businesses that do sell items such as these, many times these items are stolen. So I'd really like to get this legislation put through so we could start operating with this kind of legislation in 2016. Concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Are there any questions for Mr. DeJohn? Okay. We'll move on to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Mercurio.
Thank you, Madam President. We have one item on tonight's agenda that we can address when that comes up.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Mercurio? The next committee is Commission on Aging, and that is my commission. The next social dance will be held on December 5th at the Ross C. DeJohn Community Center. DJ Billy J. will provide the music for the evening. I want to thank the council members who have made a donation to the social dance to help out that evening and make it fun for all of the attendees. And if you haven't made a donation, I ask that you consider that for our social dance. The next Commission on Aging meeting will be held in council chambers on December 1st at 5 p.m. Are there any questions regarding the Commission on Aging? We will move on to Planning Commission. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. We met last Monday, November 16th. We had two items on the agenda. The first item will be on tonight's agenda, Ganley Nissan. The only thing that changed, nothing has changed with that legislation and building. So they will be taking that one building down, hopefully, if we pass it tonight, and putting up an attached car wash. The other item was withdrawn. That was property on 1314 Som Center Road. Vision Works wanted a reconfiguration there of the parking lot and building, but they have withdrawn their request. Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Are there any questions for Mr. DeJohn? We'll move on to the Mayfield Union Cemetery. Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. No report.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the Ad hoc Committee with Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam President. Still awaiting the final draft on that fence ordinance. And next council meeting, Mr. Monaco will have a draft of the fee schedules to get to the building department to accompany that new ordinance.
Great, thank you. Questions for Mr. Mano? Mr. DeJohn, did you have something?
But just wanted to know if it's going to be possible to get that legislation completed before the end of the year, realistically speaking?
The ordinance itself,
Correct, yeah.
as soon as we get the final draft. I haven't heard from Mr. Majewski at all, so.
I'll reach out to him tomorrow and,
Okay.
and see where he is on them. We will now move on to our public portion. Pursuant to Section 121.02, Section H8 of the codified ordinance, each person will be allowed 5 minutes to speak with a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for the entire public portion. Although this is not a time for public debate, this is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. Please know that there will be no personal attacks accepted this evening. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address City Council. If you would like to be heard this evening, please raise your hand and be recognized. Approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. It is now 7:20 and we will open the public portion. Yes, ma'am.
Now I know this moves, so I don't have to lean over. I'm Vicki Shepard with Gates Mills Club Senior Living. Thank you for allowing me to address you again this evening. You do have one resolution about the variance for the 6-foot masonry barrier. I will admit that we had Councilman DeJohn come speak at the Gates Mills Club last Friday. He did a wonderful job of explaining to us what the Planning Commission does, what the whole process is. And that was very informative for us. What we kind of came away with is the residents still want some kind of barrier there, so we're going to push for that. First choice is we don't want Winking Lizard Tavern so close. Second choice, because we know that's probably going to happen, is if it's going to be there, then we need a barrier of some kind. And so we talked about different kinds of barriers. One of them being a berm with some heavy vegetation around it so that people can't get through that. It does not need to be on both the east side and the south side. There is a handicap place in front of Manor Care that a lot of the Gates Mills Villa people use to get into and go over to Target. You can easily leave that open. That wouldn't be a problem for us. I think it's solvable. I think we can work this out, but I would like to see this variance not granted because we want some kind of barrier there. So I strongly encourage that. And then last but not least, this is the petitions that we were getting residents and their family members and staff and all to sign. So I'm going to submit that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shepard. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Pat Brewer, and I live at 1370 Orchard Heights. And I'm just here about the issue of curbside recycling. I'd very much like to see it come back. I understand that it's not cheap, but if all of the cities surrounding Mayfield Heights, Mayfield Village, Gates Mills, Highland Heights, Lyndhurst, everyone apparently in the Cleveland suburban area has this service other than Maple Heights and Warrensville Heights, according to what I read in the paper. And they are communities that would be not perhaps able to afford it. I think that we can. I've also read in our Mayfield Heights publications that 25% of the residents of Mayfield Heights are senior citizens. I know that until my parents went into assisted living 6 months ago, I not only took my recycling, I took my 92-year-old parents' recycling. I was up there every few days. It's a burden. There's for many, many people to get it there. And I congratulate, because when I'm up there, I see many other people doing it. None of us say, isn't this great? Isn't it wonderful to be here? No, we all wish we could get curbside recycling back. So I just request that you give that serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm not good with mics, so I'm just letting you know that. I'm Michael Ioka. I live at 1386 Belrose Road. And the reason why I came here today is I'm hoping that this winking lizard situation's hopefully resolved a little bit, because I really want one. I've been to many of them, and they're very family orientated places. You know, there's never the 4 I've been to, there's never been any rowdiness or loud music or whatever. It's all contained. I think it's a good thing to have. I think it's good for Mayfield Heights to have a winking lizard in their hometown. You know, I'm definitely for it. I just hope no one comes after me at my house, because they don't like my thought process in this whole thing. Also, too, I want to wish all of you happy Thanksgiving, and I want to congratulate your police department. I live at 1386 Belrose Road, and one of your councilmen knows that there's a speeding issue, and they put a box up on our street, and things are slowing down. And I'm kind of happy because we have quite a few children on our street on Belrose, and I certainly don't want to see in the paper that someone gets killed because someone goes too fast on Belrose. I'm very happy that you guys took my advice and put it to heart, and I want to congratulate all of you as well as the police department. And we got to give the fire department some kudos, because they won the chili cook-off.
Because they can cook.
So they could put fires out in the bellies as well as at homes or businesses. But nevertheless, thank you very much. Like I said, I want the winking lizard. I hope we come to some sort of conclusion with this. You know, people, I'm telling you, winking lizard is not a bad place to go. They have excellent ribs and all that. I understand it's an issue with walls or, you know, landscaping. Do whatever you have to do, but just don't lose the fact that we need one.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? Yes, sir.
Vince Crawford with Waste Management, 12340 Auburn Road, Chardon. I just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to all of you, all the residents of Mayfield Heights. It's been a pleasure that I've been able to come and speak to council so often, individually talk to some of you and get to know you over the last 2 years that I've been the representative for Mayfield Heights and Waste Management. The Service Department and Director Ferrano are one of the best departments that I get to work with, and it's been a pleasure working with them. And tonight I want to acknowledge what you have to vote in front of yourselves is that, yes, Kimball is the low bidder on the services for weekly recycling by less than 1%, and the every other week recycling option by less than 2%. So it's the slightest of margins, and I do need to recognize that and know if low cost is your consideration for your vote tonight, then I understand your mind is made up. But I do believe that it's taken us over 2 months to get to this point, because deep down inside, for some of you, service and safety really do matter. And I know that I've presented a lot of those facts, and you understand what we do bring to the table. And tonight, I would just ask that you consider for the investment that Waste Management puts into safety and service and what we've done over the past 5 years, that you would consider the vote for Waste Management to be retained as your service provider for Mayfield Heights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Hoffman. I represent Cosmo Eastgate Limited, owner of Eastgate Shopping Center. Mayor, Madam President, and members of council, I'm here for the last piece of the first part of the process. As you know, it's requesting that council uphold the granting of the variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And as you will recall, the board unanimously granted the variance so that we would not be required to build a 6-foot-high vision impairing masonry wall on the southern and possibly eastern border of the rear of the parking lot, where we would like the Winking Lizard to go. And I would like to show council a copy of the site plan. Probably help maybe to dim the lights a little bit. Thank you. So the background of this is, if you look at the placement of the restaurant, and among the concessions we agreed to make was to flip the patio so that the patio's on the west end. From the distance from the western edge of Gates Mills Villa to the Eastgate Drive is 155 feet. So as a practical matter, the entirety of the restaurant, and certainly the patio, is going to be well beyond the western edge of the apartment tower anyway. And so when the Board of Zoning Appeals unanimously granted the variance request, they commented that they highly doubted that the ordinance had been intended to ever apply to a situation where you have a high-rise apartment building. And so even with a 6-foot-high masonry wall, the approximately 85% of the people who live on floors 2 through 8 will have no protection and no benefit from a masonry wall. Those on the first floor will have a blank wall to face rather than the view to the north that they currently have. And again, given the fact that the footprint of the restaurant is almost entirely to the west of the building itself, suggests that a wall would provide no visual benefit except for those people standing in the parking lot, which you can see to the west of the building itself. And so over the last several weeks, we've made a number of concessions to our original preferred plan, including our commitment that we will move the salt pile structure considerably to the north, that we would flip the patio to the west side, that we would never allow live music to occur on the patio on those approximately 3 months of the year when the patio will be open. And we also agreed to withdraw our setback reduction, which had also been granted unanimously by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So we've made another number of concessions without asking for anything in return. And so what we're asking for this evening is simply that the variance allowing us not to build a masonry wall be upheld by this council. And what I had already committed to do 2 weeks ago was in its stead to provide considerable landscaping on our side of the property to allow for some kind of visual shielding, if you will, and aesthetically positive look for people from Gates Mills Villa, who are the ones who are certainly closest and within plain view of the restaurant. And so, again, I will renew my commitment to that as part of the process of allowing for the variance so that we do not have to build the masonry wall. Having said that, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well.
Madam President,
Yes.
may I ask Mr. Hoffman a question, please? Mr. Hoffman, on that south side of that, if you can put the diagram back up there, on the south side there, is it possible to put mounding there?
Yes, we can put a mound. Now, the mound's not gonna be 6 foot tall. The mound will be consistent with what I would say is normal landscaping considerations, because if you have a 6 foot high mound, that's not, or a 5 foot or a 4 foot high mound, that's not gonna look very nice. The whole point is to have landscaping itself to be the aesthetically pleasing part of that. The other consideration is we don't want the landscaping to completely obscure the fact that there is a restaurant behind it, so that cars approaching from the south, which is to say from Mayfield Road, will have the opportunity to see some part of the restaurant to know it's there. As I have always said, part of being a successful operation is the ability to be seen from a distance. And so we don't want people driving past Eastgate Drive only to find out when they get to the theater that Winking Lizard is behind them. So there has to be some visibility. That's my only point on the height. We are willing to mound it and put landscaping on top of it as long as it's reasonable.
And do your trucks come in on that side of the building, the south side of the building?
Trucks serving which?
Trucks and waste hauling vehicles, and do they come down that driveway there?
Yes.
Will it be on that side of the building, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I don't quite
On the
understand.
south side of the building.
All of the trucks that serve Eastgate come in through the south way primarily, because that's where all the dumpster enclosures
No,
are.
I'm speaking of specifically the
restaurant?
Winking, yes, the Winking Lizard building.
It depends which direction they're coming from. If they come from the north, then they would probably go in behind Mark's. But as many trucks do, if they're coming from the south, they'll come in. If they're coming from Mayfield, they'll come in through that main drive.
Okay, but will they go down to the back of the building that faces Manor Care? Will the unloading and loading be on that end of the building? Do you know?
Yes,
yet?
it will, yeah, there'll be no way to load through the patio. They'll have to come to the east side of the building.
So everything will happen from the east side of the building, is that correct?
Correct. And the entrance will be to the north.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
I think what Mr. DeJohn's trying to ask is, will they go behind
That's
Winking
exactly
Lizard?
No,
Yeah, they're gonna be on the side of it.
no,
correct?
it's all going to be landscaped. It was
Right.
never intended to be paved between the restaurant and the parking lot immediately to the south of it.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Mr. Manfredi?
My name is Gino Manfredi. I reside 6755 Mayfield Road at the Gates Mills Villa. I think it would only be fair if the people who want to put this building up, if they would stake out just how large this building is going to be in reference to how close it's going to be to Gates Mills Villa. We only have a very, very bad view of this supposed to be and this supposed to be. So what I'm asking, Mr. Hoffman, is that you have the length of the building, the width of the building staked out now, so we all can see and be on the same page, and there might not be as much problems. But it's only fair that we really know, because as of now, I'm definitely against it. And there's not one thing that he proposed that would encourage me to go any other way, affecting, when you're talking about all of the residents, you're talking about 60 homes, at least 60. There's 200 residents in our building alone, so that's like 200 homes. This is our home. And they're all elderly people. I appreciate your consideration, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manfredi. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to be heard? It is now 7:38, and we will close the public portion. We will now move on to resolutions, and we will begin with Resolution 2015-55. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Resolution number 2015-55, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Andrew Hoffman, Cosmo Eastgate Limited, on behalf of the Winking Lizard Restaurant, 1355 Som Center Road, a variance to construct a new building on the property without the 6-foot masonry buffer wall along the east and south property lines. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-29-014. Third reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded. Oh, we don't have to.
Nope.
Just a motion to approve. I apologize. Moved by Mr. Mercurio and seconded by Mr. Mano. Discussion. Mr. Mercurio?
Again, this was a unanimous approval by the BZA, and Mr. Hoffman did mention in the BZA meeting that in lieu of the masonry wall, he would put landscape buffer there.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes, Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to amend this ordinance for it to say, and Mr. Murphy does have the amendment, with it to say with the condition that a landscape buffer be erected in its stead. As you can see, it asks for landscaping to be in place of the masonry buffer, and I would also recommend mounding as well as the landscaping buffer.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes, in section 1, and I spoke to Mr. DeJohn this afternoon. He indicated the type of amendment that he would be proposing. There would be a buffer, and Winking Lizard would have to go back to the Planning Commission to have the type of buffer, mounding, landscaping, trees, whatever it may be, approved by the Planning Commission, so that there's another consideration there.
Madam President?
Mayor?
The plan would have to go back to the Planning Commission anyway, without this stipulation. And also, I mean, we've heard from Mr. Hoffman, it's in the minutes, that he's going to put up the buffer. Mr. Hoffman's always been a man of his word, and I just want that stated in the record.
Madam President?
Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Mercurio, do you know why this was a unanimous decision not to put up a buffer wall there? Do you remember exactly?
As
I mean, it's
Mr.
been a
Hoffman
while.
said, it was the opinion that really the spirit of the ordinance for the masonry wall was really for single-family homes, and not necessarily the apartments.
Thank you.
And I believe, Mr. DeJohn, it was stated that many of the residents who live in all three of those, or in both of those facilities, not Manor Care so much, because that's, those people are more transient, I believe, but I believe in the Gates Mills Villa and Gates Mills Club, those residents walk through, they cut through the back of those properties to go into the parking lot to go to Target and Mark's. And Mr. Hoffman had mentioned with a wall there, they wouldn't be able to walk through. They'd have to go all the way around, making it much more difficult for them as well.
Ms. Shepherd said that most of them cut through on the east side of the property and not the south side of the property. So they go around there where that walkway is by Manor Cares. Is that correct?
Madam President,
Mr. Monaco?
I'd like to make a motion to table this item until the Planning Commission has an opportunity to review the drawing and approve it. I remember years ago when Alan Bradley went behind my house and, the ordinance clearly stated that a masonry wall had to be built. I was opposing this because I would have liked to see a mound and I would like to see some trees over it. But I was told no, without any doubt that a wall had to go up. Now, I don't know exactly what the hardship is here in this situation, why a wall should not go up. But I'm willing to compromise. But I like to see an alternative. I like to see some kind of drawing showing what kind of trees, how high the trees are gonna be, so that we can make a determination and we know exactly what we're gonna get.
Madam President?
We have a motion on the table to table. Is there a second? Okay, there's no second, so that's the end of our discussion for this. We're going to continue discussion.
Madam President?
Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Monaco, it's gonna come to the Planning Commission anyhow. So it can be, technically defeated there if the commission feels that the buffer wall is not adequate in place of a masonry wall.
So my question is, why approve it now if it's gonna be denied later?
Madam Chairman,
Well-
if I can answer that. Because it's a BZA matter and council has to move on it now. It's before council. You can certainly choose to table it, but the variance request has timelines with regard to appealing it to Common Pleas Court. So that decision has to be made long before Planning Commission gets to consider it. It's almost like a chicken or an egg type thing, what comes first. In this case, they chose to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals first.
Mr. Murphy, assuming that the BZA approves this, does it have to come to council again?
You mean planning?
Yes.
Yes, it comes back to council.
So we have to review it anyway, right?
Correct. That's the procedure.
So what do we gain by approving it tonight if it has to go to BZA and come back to council again?
What council is approving or considering, and what the legislation accomplishes is approving the variance where there is no 10-foot masonry wall required. Now, there is a condition in the amended ordinance that there has to be some type of a buffer, a landscape buffer, and that would be considered by planning and ultimately by council. But what council is looking at tonight is whether or not to put up a 6-foot masonry wall.
Mr. DeJohn, you made a motion to amend.
Correct. Motion to amend 2015-55 as amended as is in front of you.
Based upon the handout that.
Correct. Based
Correct.
on, yes.
Yes, I'm
The
waiting for
motion
you to
that's in
state
front
all
of
of
you.
that. Moved by?
So we need a second on that.
Yes.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to amend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes,
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Resolution 2015. It's been adopted. Yeah. Amended.
Now it's before council as amended.
It's, okay. Oh, now we have to suspend the rules. No. now we need a motion to approve. Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion to approve.
This is the motion to approve as amended, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Nope.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes,
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Resolution 2015-55 has been approved as amended. We'll move on to Resolution 2015-57. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Resolution 2015-57, a resolution accepting bids for the weekly collection and disposal of solid waste and biweekly curbside collection of recycling, and providing dumpsters in accordance with the bid specifications and declaring an emergency. Kimball Companies, Inc. Second reading.
Suspend. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. You two, stop it. Moved by Mr. Mercurio. Seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Okay. Discussion. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. As noted in the memo that I sent that went in the agenda package, this legislation that is before council, there were some corrections made and some clarifications made, and I think that the legislation has been changed enough where it should have a formal motion to amend and voted upon by council. So the legislation that went out with the packet notes it amended at the top, and it should be amended before it's adopted.
So now we're going to do a motion to amend. Is there a motion to amend?
I'll make a motion to
Moved by
amend.
Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to amend.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
And just as a point of clarification, the amendment is the legislation that was distributed to council with the agenda package.
Do we have a motion to approve as amended? We suspended? Yeah. Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to amend. No, we did that already. Now we can discuss it. Oh, gosh. You're having a lot of fun with this tonight, Mr. Murphy. Discussion. So we have the amended resolution in front of us pertaining to Kimball Companies and their bid for recycling biweekly and collection of solid waste. Mr. DeJohn?
Yeah, just wanted the public to know that this is automatic pickup of garbage cans. They'll be getting garbage cans and recycling garbage cans to automatically, with an arm, pick the garbage cans up and put them into their trucks. So just to clarify.
It's automated. It is
It's an
automated.
total
recyc-
automated system, and all of the waste hauling industry is going towards that automated system. And if you just look around us, Highland Heights has it, Mayfield Village has it, South Euclid has it. So there's a lot of cities. I believe Beechwood has it. So there's many cities that have this, and it's going to that type of system. So, thank you.
Mr. Monaco?
I'd like to make a few points here. The first one is that Waste Management has always provided us with the best service that anybody ever could wish for. They picked up building material, anything that was thrown out on the curb was picked up. I asked the question at the ad hoc meeting, and I don't believe, even though the Kimball is a very reputable, very respected company, I don't believe that we're gonna get the same service with Kimball as we are with Waste Management. Number two, if we go to the bi-weekly trash pickup, I think it's gonna pose a problem for the building department and for our service department. In my mind, people are gonna get confused. The trash, the recycle bin is gonna be placed on the curb at the wrong days, and neighbors are gonna be calling because they think that the trash can is left outside, and it's gonna be a problem again for the service department because they have to pick it up, and for the building department because they're gonna be called because there's trash across the street. Also believe that the resident of Mayfield Heights should have the same service that the surrounding communities have. If Lyndhurst and the other communities around here can afford to have the recycling picked up every week, I think Mayfield Heights should do the same. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Mr. DeJohn.
I did talk to Highland Heights and Mayfield Village, and both cities told me that they have every week pickup of recycling, and both told me that they really didn't need it every week, and they could have got away with every other week. So both of those cities did relay that to me, and Highland Heights, I even talked to the assistant the service director over there, former assistant service director over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes,
Mr. Monaco?
Nope.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Resolution 2015-57 has been adopted as amended. We're going to move on to Resolution 2015-58. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Resolution 2015-58, a resolution accepting bids for the weekly collection and disposal of solid waste and for container recycling, authorizing and directing the mayor to enter into a contract for said services based upon the bids and declaring an emergency. Waste Management, Inc., second reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Again, we had a committee of the whole meeting on November 18th, and we heard from Mr. Crawford from Waste Management to further discuss the specifications of his bid. If the resolution is approved, Waste Management would be providing solid waste and dumpster containers, which would, are at Marsall Towers, and no recycling. Discussion.
Madam President,
Mayor?
the community center.
The community
I know what
center.
you meant, Marsall Road.
Marsall Road.
I don't want anybody to get excited over there.
That they're getting dumpsters? Mr. DeJohn.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I think the people and the residents of Mayfield Heights have spoken, and they want recycling brought back to their curbside at their homes. So I think this resolution should be defeated.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano?
No.
Mr. Mercurio?
No.
Mr. DeJohn?
No.
Mrs. Sabetta?
no,
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
No.
Mrs. Tressi?
No. Resolution 2015-58 has failed. We will now move on to Resolution 2015-60.
Thank you. Resolution 2015-60, a resolution correcting the amount awarded to Downing Construction Company, Inc. for the office renovation and canopy addition to the police station and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Do I have a motion to place Resolution 2015-60 on first reading? Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to place Resolution 2015-60 on first reading.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes,
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, Resolution 2015-60 has been placed on first reading. We'll now move on to Resolution 2015-61. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Resolution 2015-61, a resolution reversing the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Andrew Hoffman, Cosmo Eastgate Limited, on behalf of the Winking Lizard Restaurant, 1355 Som Center Road, a 10-foot setback variance to construct a new building on the property 20 feet from the south property line. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-29-14. Third reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Actually, it's first reading, I'm sorry.
First reading, moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. At our November 9th meeting, Mr. Hoffman stated he would forego the variance for that 10-foot setback for Winking Lizard. Tonight we'll be voting on the reversal of the BZA's decision in initially granting that variance. Mr. Mercurio, would you like to add anything?
I have nothing to add. Standard procedure, new standard procedure.
It's a no vote to
Just an
reverse.
explanation before we vote so everyone is clear. If you vote in agreement to reverse the BZA's decision in granting the variance for the 10-foot setback, you will vote yes. To overturn the reversal, you will vote no. Correct, gentlemen?
Yes. Yes.
Correct, okay. Is everyone clear? Mr. DeJohn?
So, Madam President, a yes vote requires them to stick by the 30-foot setback, correct?
That is correct. 20 foot without the 10, yeah. 20 foot.
It's 30. It's a 30-foot
Fine.
setback.
They wanted a 10-foot variance from the 30 to make it 20.
So we're reversing it back from 20 to 30.
Correct,
So basically, if you vote yes, they're not getting the variance.
yes. We've reversed the variance. So you will vote yes if you want to reverse the variance. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Resolution 2015-61 has been approved. We will move on to Resolution 2015-62. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Resolution number 2015-62, a resolution authorizing the Director of Finance to transfer funds in accordance with amounts listed in ordinance numbers 2015-11, 2015-22, and 2015-43. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Everyone received a memo from Mr. Tribby with an explanation on the transfer of the additional funds. Mr. Tribby, would you like to add anything this evening?
Only that this resolution is required, once you approve the final appropriation, you also need to approve me to actually transfer the funds. It appears almost like duplicating the process, but it's required by the state statutes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve. Joe Mercurio? Oh,
I'm sorry.
I suspended. Did we not do a motion to approve? Mr. Mercurio and Mrs. Sabetta. Now we'll do a roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Resolution 2015-62 has been adopted. We will now move on to ordinances, and we will begin with ordinance 2015-38.
Thank you. Ordinance 2015-38, an ordinance enacting Chapter 794 of the codified ordinances of the City of Mayfield Heights regarding municipal income tax and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Do I have a motion to place ordinance 2015-38 on second reading? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to place on second reading.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, ordinance 2015-38 has been placed on second reading. We'll move on to ordinance 2015-39. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-39, an ordinance authorizing the city to enter into the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, NOPEC, and the execution and delivery of the agreement establishing NOPEC and approving the bylaws of NOPEC and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Do I have a motion to place ordinance 2015-39 on first reading? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, ordinance 2015-39 has been placed on first reading. Mr. Murphy, we'll move on to ordinance 2015-40.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-40, approving the plan of operation and governance for the NOPEC electricity aggregation program for the purpose of jointly establishing and implementing an electricity aggregation program and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Do I have a motion to place ordinance 2015-40 on first reading? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, ordinance 2015-40 has been placed on first reading. We'll move on to ordinance 2015-41. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-41, an ordinance approving the plan of operation and governance for the NOPEC gas aggregation program for the purpose of jointly establishing and implementing a gas aggregation program and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Do I have a motion to place on first reading? Moved by Mr. Monaco, seconded by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, ordinance 2015-41 has been placed on first reading. Ordinance 2015-42. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-42, an ordinance authorizing entering into a natural gas program agreement with the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Do I have a motion to place ordinance 2015-42 on first reading? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion to place ordinance 2015-42 on first reading.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes,
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes, ordinance 2015-42 has been placed on first reading. We'll move on to ordinance 2015-43. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-43, an ordinance amending ordinance numbers 2015-11, 2015-22, and 2015-34. The appropriation expenditures of the City of Mayfield Heights, State of Ohio, for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2015. Specifically, the transfer and supplemental appropriation of funds in various accounts. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Monaco, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mr. Mano. Mr. Mercurio from the Finance Committee, or Mr. Tribby, would you like to offer an explanation?
You all received the memo that I sent out to you. I just basically would ask if any of you have any questions regarding any of the items in that memo. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Generally, our increased appropriation would be about 2.73% over what was approved back in March. We were projecting a possible deficit in the general fund, but as I indicated, most of that is because of transfers for capital improvements. I don't anticipate an actual deficit for operating purposes, but your official, if you adopt this ordinance, the worst-case scenario would be about a $200,000 operating deficit, but I honestly don't think we will spend that, and we'll probably finish in a positive balance for operating purposes, which is the important part.
Very important part. Questions for Mr. Tribby? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Ordinance 2015-43 has been adopted. We'll move on to ordinance 2015-44. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-44, an ordinance making appropriation for current expenditures of the City of Mayfield Heights, State of Ohio, during the period of January 1, 2016 to and including March 31, 2016. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
yes,
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mercurio, seconded by Mr. Mano. Ordinance provides for the current expenses and expenditures for the first quarter of 2016. Am I correct, Mr. Tribby?
That is correct. This will allow us to continue operations pending the adoption of the permanent budget. The amounts listed here are approximately 25% of what was authorized to be spent this year. There are a few exceptions, but that's the general numbers that I've presented to you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressy?
Yes. Ordinance 2015-44 has been adopted. I now need a motion to add ordinance 2015-45 to our agenda.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Dijon. Roll call on the motion to add ordinance 2015-45 to our agenda.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressy?
Yes, this motion has carried. Mr. Murphy, will you please read the ordinance?
Thank you. Ordinance number 2015-45, an ordinance amending Chapter 717 of the Codified Ordinances of the City entitled Dealers in Secondhand Articles and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to place ordinance 2015-45 on first reading?
Yes.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. Sharia?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressy?
Yes, ordinance 2015-45 has been placed on first reading. Mr. Mano.
Madam Chairman, under ordinances, we have this tabled ordinance, 2015-30. This was from August. How long do we carry these before we do something with them?
I think I have July 17 as the date. That's when he came in to talk about it.
I would have to look. Some cities provide that the ordinance falls off the table automatically when a council term expires, which for Mayfield Heights would be December 31st of this year. Other cities don't make a provision, and I haven't really looked to see whether or not this ordinance would be subject to that or not. I can note that I did talk with the attorney for Artis this afternoon, and he is endeavoring to provide information to the city that would allow council to consider this request. So hopefully we'll have something buttoned down by the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to motions, and we have one motion on the agenda. Mr. Murphy.
Motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a final site plan for Ganley Nissan, 6060 Mayfield Road, for modification to an existing non-conforming use/building, removing a 7,000 square foot accessory building and adding a 1,870 square foot automatic car wash to the main building.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So be it.
Moved by Mr. Dijon, seconded by Mr. Monaco. So Ganley Nissan would be taking down the accessory building, and it's been approved by planning. Is there any other discussion, Mr. Dijon?
No, it'll probably give them more parking in their parking lot, so hopefully they'll take some of those cars that are close to Mayfield Road, and they'll put them in the back where they're taking the building down. That's what I'd like to see.
Aren't they putting a car wash in there?
They are attaching it to their building, but the other building is a lot larger. So they're gonna gain a lot of spaces.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This motion has been carried. We will now move on to new business or comments from council.
Madam President?
Mayor?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, council did a great job of looking at all the contracts for trash removal and curbside recycling, and did their due diligence. It took us a while to hammer out the exact details, but the residents, I think, will be very happy to have curbside recycling back. We are going to do some education because I think that is key as far as scheduling and as far as what goes into the recycling containers. Might be a little bit different from what people are used to. But I just want to commend, you know, council and also the representatives from both companies, Kimball and Waste Management, for doing a great job and getting us a lot of information, never hesitating to come and speak to us and answer a lot of questions. But I think the process was a good process, and we got a lot of information. So I just want to thank you.
And I also think our residents will be very happy to finally have curbside recycling at their homes. Any other comments? I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and seeing no other comments, I need a motion to adjourn.
Me.
Always Mr. Sharia, and seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Yeah, the only motion, that's right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are now adjourned.